Please like, share, and subscribe this video to support.
2 U.S. Code Chapter 28, Architect of the Capitol. 2 U.S. Code Subchapter 3, Personnel. 2 U.S. Code Part A, General. 2 U.S. Code Paragraph 1831, Human Resources Program. A. Short title. This section may be cited as the Architect of the Capitol Human Resources Act. B. Finding and Purpose. 1. Finding. The Congress finds that the Office of the Architect of the Capitol should develop human resources management programs that are consistent with the practices common among other federal and private sector organizations. 2. Purpose. It is the purpose of this section to require the Architect of the Capitol to establish and maintain a personnel management system that incorporates fundamental principles that exist in other modern personnel systems. C. Personnel Management System. 1. Establishment. The Architect of the Capitol shall establish and maintain a personnel management system. 2. Requirements. The personnel management system shall at a minimum include the following. A system which ensures that applicants for employment and employees of the Architect of the Capitol are appointed, promoted, and assigned on the basis of merit and fitness after fair and equitable consideration of all applicants and employees through open competition. B. An equal employment opportunity program which includes an affirmative employment program for employees and applicants for employment, and procedures for monitoring progress by the Architect of the Capitol in ensuring a workforce reflective of the diverse labor force. C. A system for the classification of positions which takes into account the difficulty, responsibility, and qualification requirements of the work performed, and which conforms to the principle of equal pay for substantially equal work. D. A program for the training of Architect of the Capitol employees which has among its goals improved employee performance and opportunities for employee advancement. E. A formal performance appraisal system which will permit the accurate evaluation of job performance on the basis of objective criteria for all Architect of the Capitol employees. F. A fair and equitable system to address unacceptable conduct and performance by Architect of the Capitol employees, including a general statement of violations, sanctions, and procedures which shall be made known to all employees, and a formal grievance procedure. G. A program to provide services to deal with mental health, alcohol abuse, drug abuse, and other employee problems, and which ensures employee confidentiality. H. A formal policy statement regarding the use and accrual of sick and annual leave which shall be made known to all employees, and which is consistent with the other requirements of this section. D. Implementation of Personnel Management System. 1. Development of Plan. The Architect of the Capitol shall A. Develop a plan for the establishment and maintenance of a personnel management system designed to achieve the requirements of subsection C. B. Submit the plan to the Speaker of the House of Representatives, the House Office Building Commission, the Committee on Rules and Administration of the Senate, the Joint Committee on the Library, and the Committees on Appropriations of the Senate and the House of Representatives not later than 12 months after July 22, 1994, and C. Implement the plan not later than 90 days after the plan is submitted to the Speaker of the House of Representatives, the House Office Building Commission, the Committee on Rules and Administration of the Senate, the Joint Committee on the Library, and the Committees on Appropriations of the Senate and the House of Representatives, as specified in subparagraph B. 2. Evaluation and reporting. The Architect of the Capitol shall develop a system of oversight and evaluation to ensure that the personnel management system of the Architect of the Capitol achieves the requirements of subsection C and complies with all other relevant laws, rules, and regulations. The Architect of the Capitol shall report to the Speaker of the House of Representatives, the House Office Building Commission, the Committee on Rules and Administration of the Senate, and the Joint Committee on the Library on an annual basis the results of its evaluation under this subsection. 3. Application of laws. Nothing in this section shall be construed to alter or supersede any other provision of law otherwise applicable to the Architect of the Capitol or its employees, unless expressly provided in this section. 2 U.S. Code Paragraph 1832. Assignment and reassignment of personnel. Notwithstanding any other provisions of law, in order to improve the economic use of the personal services of his employees, the Architect of the Capitol is authorized on and after October 12, 1979, to assign and reassign, without increase or decrease in basic salary or wages, any person on the employment rolls of his office, for personal services in any buildings, facilities, or grounds under his jurisdiction, or for personal services in connection with any project under his jurisdiction for which appropriations have been made and are available, whenever such action, in his opinion, will be most advantageous to the interest of or result in either specific or overall savings to the government. Exceptions may be made where there are differences in equipment. No assignment or reassignment of personnel by the Architect of the Capitol pursuant to this provision shall operate in any respect to augment or decrease any general or specific appropriation. 2 U.S. Code Paragraph 1833. Lighting, heating, and ventilating House of Representatives. The electrician, together with everything pertaining to the electrical machinery and apparatus, and the ventilation and heating of the House of Representatives, and all laborers and others connected with the lighting, heating, and ventilating thereof, shall be subject exclusively to the orders, and in all respects under the direction, of the Architect of the Capitol, subject to the control of the Speaker, and no removal or appointment shall be made except with his approval. And all engineers and others who are engaged in heating and ventilating the House shall be subject to the orders, and in all respects under the direction, of the Architect of the Capitol, subject to the control of the Speaker, and no removal or appointment shall be made except with his approval. 2 U.S. Code Paragraph 1834. Heating and ventilating Senate Wing. All engineers and others who are engaged in heating and ventilating the Senate wing of the Capitol shall be subject to the orders, and in all respects under the direction of the Architect of the Capitol, subject to the approval of the Senate Committee on Rules and Administration. 2 U.S. Code Paragraph 1835. Interagency details. A. Authorizing details of employees under joint agency agreements. In addition to any other authority relating to the detail of employees, the Architect of the Capitol and the head of any other department, agency, or instrumentality of the United States government may enter into a joint agency agreement under which 1. Employees of the Office of the Architect of the Capitol, including employees of the United States Botanic Garden, may be detailed to such department, agency, or instrumentality on a reimbursable or non-reimbursable basis, and 2. Employees of such department, agency, or instrumentality may be detailed to the Office of the Architect of the Capitol on a reimbursable or non-reimbursable basis. B. Duration. The detail of an employee under a joint agency agreement under this section shall be for such duration as may be provided in the agreement, except that in the case of a detail made on a non-reimbursable basis, the duration of the detail may not exceed 1 year unless the Architect of the Capitol and the head of the department, agency, or instrumentality involved each determine that an extension of the detail of the employee is in the public interest. C. No effect on appropriations of recipient of non-reimbursable detail. For purposes of any law, rule, or regulation, the detail of an employee on a non-reimbursable basis under a joint agency agreement under this section for a fiscal year shall not be treated as an increase or modification of the appropriation for the fiscal year of the office to whom the employee is detailed. D. Effective date. This section shall apply with respect to fiscal year 2019 and each succeeding fiscal year. 2 U.S. Code Part B, Compensation. 2 U.S. Code Paragraph 1841, Single per annum gross rates of pay. In neither the rate of pay of 1. An employee of the Office of the Architect of the Capitol, or 2. An employee of the House Restaurant, or of the Senate Restaurant, under the supervision of the Architect of the Capitol as an agent of the House or Senate, respectively, as the case may be, is fixed or adjusted on or after the effective date of this section. That rate, as so fixed and adjusted, shall be a single per annum gross rate. 2 U.S. Code Paragraph 1842, Conversion of existing pay rates. The Architect of the Capitol shall convert, as of the effective date of this section, to a single per annum gross rate, the rate of pay of each employee described in subparagraph 1, or subparagraph 2 of section 1841 of this title, whose pay immediately prior to such effective date was fixed at a basic rate with respect to which additional pay was payable by law. 2 U.S. Code Paragraph 1843, Obsolete references. In any case in which 1. The rate of pay of, or any maximum or minimum rate of pay with respect to a. Any employee described in subparagraph 1, or subparagraph 2 of section 1841 of this title, or b. The position of such employee, or c. Any class or group of such employees or positions, is referred to in or provided by statute or other authority, and 2. The rate so referred to or provided is a basic rate with respect to which additional pay is provided by law. Such statutory provision or authority shall be deemed to refer, in lieu of such basic rate, to the per annum gross rate which an employee receiving such basic rate immediately prior to the effective date of this section would receive, without regard to such statutory provision or authority, under section 1842 of this title on and after such date. 2 U.S. Code Paragraph 1844, Savings Provisions. The provisions of sections 1841 to 1846 of this title shall not be construed to 1. Limit or otherwise affect any authority for the making of any appointment to, or for fixing or adjusting the pay for, the position of any employee described in subparagraph 1, or subparagraph 2 of section 1841 of this title. 2. Affect the continuity of employment of, or reduce the pay of, any employee holding any position referred to in subparagraph 1 of this section, or 3. Modify, change, supersede, or otherwise affect the provisions of sections 5504 and 6101a(5) of Title V, insofar as such sections relate to the Office of the Architect of the Capitol. 2 U.S. Code Paragraph 1845, Effect on existing law. A. All provisions of law inconsistent with sections 1841 to 1846 of this title are hereby superseded to the extent of the inconsistency. B. Sections 5504 and 6101a(5) of Title V shall apply to employees of the House and Senate restaurants who are paid at per annum rates of pay as long as such employees are under the supervision of the Architect of the Capitol as an agent of the House or Senate, respectively, as the case may be. 2 U.S. Code Paragraph 1846, Exemptions. Notwithstanding any other provision of sections 1841 to 1846 of this title, the foregoing provisions of such sections do not apply to any employee described in section 1841 of this title, whose pay is fixed and adjusted. 1. In accordance with Chapter 51 and Subchapter 3 of Chapter 53 of Title V, relating to classification and general schedule pay rates. 2. In accordance with Subchapter 4 of Chapter 53 of Title V, relating to prevailing rate pay systems. 3. At per hour or per diem rates in accordance with Section 3 of the Legislative Pay Act of 1929, as amended, 46-38. 55 Stat 615, relating to employees performing professional and technical services for the Architect of the Capitol in connection with construction projects and employees under the Office of the Architect of the Capitol whose tenure of employment is temporary or of uncertain duration, or 4. In accordance with prevailing rates under authority of sections 2042 to 2047 of this title, or Section 208 of the First Supplemental Civil Functions Appropriation Act, 1941, 54 Stat 1056, Public, Number 812, 76th Congress, relating to the duties of the Architect of the Capitol with respect to the House of Representatives restaurant. 2 U.S. Code Paragraph 1847. Authorization to fix basic rate of compensation for certain positions. On and after August 21, 1959, the Architect of the Capitol is authorized, without regard to Chapter 51 and Subchapter 3 of Chapter 53 of Title V, to fix the compensation of 4 positions under the appropriation salaries, Office of the Architect of the Capitol, of 2 positions under the appropriation Capitol buildings, and of 1 position under the appropriation House Office buildings, at a basic rate of $8,200 per annum each, provided that this provision shall not be applicable to the positions of architect or assistant architect. On and after August 21, 1959, the Architect of the Capitol is authorized, without regard to Chapter 51 and Subchapter 3 of Chapter 53 of Title V, to fix the compensation of 1 position under the appropriation Senate office buildings, at a basic rate of $8,200 per annum. 2 U.S. Code Paragraph 1848, Compensation of certain positions in Office of Architect of the Capitol. Amount of compensation to be that specified in Appropriations Acts. Notwithstanding any other provision of law, the pay for positions described in subsection B shall be the amount specified for such positions in Appropriations Acts. B. Positions covered. The positions referred to in subsection A are 1. The position of assistant referred to in the proviso in the first undesignated paragraph under the center subheadings Office of the Architect of the Capitol and Salaries in the first section of the Legislative Branch Appropriation Act, 1971, 2 U.S.C. 1804, 1 and 2. The 8 positions provided for in the third and fourth undesignated paragraphs under the center subheadings Office of the Architect of the Capitol and Salaries in the first section of the Legislative Branch Appropriation Act, 1960, 2 U.S.C. 1847. C. Calculation of amounts. The pay for each position described in subsection B shall be the pay payable for such position with respect to the last pay period before this section takes effect, subject to any applicable adjustment during fiscal year 1988 under, or by reference to any applicable adjustment during fiscal year 1988 under, Subchapter I of Chapter 53 of Title V. D. Effective date. This section shall apply in fiscal years beginning after September 30th, 1987, with respect to pay periods beginning after December 22nd, 1987. 2 U.S. Code Paragraph 1849, Compensation of certain positions under jurisdiction of Architect of the Capitol. The Architect of the Capitol may fix the rate of basic pay for not more than 32 positions at a rate not to exceed the highest total rate of pay for the senior executive service under Subchapter 8 of Chapter 53 of Title V for the locality involved. 2 U.S. Code Paragraph 1850, Compensation of registered nurses. Notwithstanding any other provision of law, effective on the first day of the first applicable pay period which begins on or after December 27, 1974, the positions of registered nurses compensated under appropriations for Capitol buildings, Senate office buildings, and House office buildings shall be allocated by the Architect of the Capitol at not to exceed grade 12 of the general schedule. Notwithstanding any other provision of law, effective January 1, 1975, none of the funds appropriated to the Architect of the Capitol shall thereafter be available for any nursing position unless the position is occupied by a registered nurse, provided that such provision shall not be applicable to the present incumbents of such positions. 2 U.S. Code Paragraph 1851. Gratuities for survivors of deceased employees. Until otherwise provided by law, there is authorized to be paid out of the applicable accounts of the House of Representatives, on vouchers signed by the Chairman of the Committee on House Oversight, a gratuity to the widow, widower, or heirs-at-law of each deceased employee under the jurisdiction of the Architect of the Capitol who was assigned to duty in the House of Representatives at the time of his death. The payment of each such gratuity shall be in accordance with uniform rules and regulations adopted by the Committee on House Oversight, except that no such gratuity shall be in excess of that payable to the widow, widower, or heirs-at-law of any deceased employee under the jurisdiction of the Architect of the Capitol having a comparable length of service, who was assigned to similar duties in the Senate at the time of his death. 2 U.S. Code Paragraph 1852, Withholding and remittance of state income tax. A. Agreement by Architect with appropriate state official, covered individuals. Whenever 1. The law of any state provides for the collection of an income tax by imposing upon employers generally the duty of withholding sums from the compensation of employees and remitting such sums to the authorities of such state, and 2. Such duty to withhold is imposed generally with respect to the compensation of employees who are residents of such state. Then the Architect of the Capitol is authorized, in accordance with the provisions of this section, to enter into an agreement with the appropriate official of that state to provide for the withholding and remittance of sums for individuals. A. Employed by the Office of the Architect of the Capitol, the United States Botanic Garden, or the Senate Restaurant, and B. Who request the Architect to make such withholdings for remittance to that state. B. Number of remittances authorized. Any agreement entered into under subsection A of this section shall not require the Architect to remit such sums more often than once each calendar quarter. C. Request for withholding and remittance. Amount of withholding, number and effective date of requests, change of designated state, revocation of request, rules and regulations. 1. An individual employed by the Office of the Architect of the Capitol, the United States Botanic Garden, or the Senate Restaurant may request the Architect to withhold sums from his pay for remittance to the appropriate authorities of the state that he designates. Amounts of withholdings shall be made in accordance with those provisions of the law of that state, which apply generally to withholding by employers. 2. An individual may have in effect at any time only one request for withholdings, and he may not have more than 2 such requests in effect with respect to different states during any one calendar year. The request for withholdings is effective on the first day of the first pay period commencing on or after the day on which the request is received in the Office of the Architect, the Botanic Garden Office, or the Senate Restaurant Accounting Office except that A. When the Architect first enters into an agreement with the state, a request for withholding shall be effective on such date as the Architect may determine, and B. When an individual first receives an appointment, the request shall be effective on the day of appointment, if the individual makes the request at the time of appointment. 3. An individual may change the state designated by him for the purposes of having withholdings made and request that the withholdings be remitted in accordance with such change, and he may also revoke his request for withholdings. Any change in the state designated or revocation is effective on the first day of the first pay period commencing on or after the day on which the request for change or the revocation is received in the appropriate office. 4. The Architect is authorized to issue rules and regulations he considers appropriate in carrying out this subsection. D. Time or times of agreements by Architect. The Architect may enter into agreements under subsection A of this section at such time or times as he considers appropriate. E. Provisions as not imposing duty, burden, requirement, or penalty upon United States or any officer or employee of United States. This section imposes no duty, burden, or requirement upon the United States or any officer or employee of the United States, except as specifically provided in this section. Nothing in this section shall be deemed to consent to the application of any provision of law which has the effect of subjecting the United States or any officer or employee of the United States to any penalty or liability by reason of the provisions of this section. F. State defined. For the purposes of this section, state means any of the states of the United States. 2 U.S. Code Paragraph 1853, exemption of officers and employees of Architect of Capital from certain federal pay provisions. The classes of employees whose compensation is authorized by Section 3 of the Legislative Pay Act of 1929, as amended, 46 Stat 38, 55 Stat 615, to be fixed by the Architect of the Capital without regard to the Classification Act of 1923, as amended, are authorized to be compensated without regard to Chapter 51 and Subchapter 3 of Chapter 53 of Title 5. 2 U.S. Code Paragraph 1854, overtime compensation for certain employees of Architect of Capital. For overtime pay purposes, per diem and per hour employees under the office of the Architect of the Capital not subject to Chapter 51 and Subchapter 3 of Chapter 53 of Title 5 shall be regarded as subject to the provisions of Sections 5544a and 6102 of Title 5 and Sections 60E3 and 60E4 of this title shall not be applicable to such employees.